Let's now welcome Paolo Ricciuti to the call. Paolo, how are you doing today? You're joining us from Italy, I believe.
Yes.
Fantastic. Let's give your slides up, and the floor is yours, my friend.
Yes. Thank you. All right. So welcome everyone to my talk. It's called the TMCP, a new way to build MCP server in TypeScript. Now, before we begin, I think a small presentation is due, and I brought with me my assistant here so that he may be able to present myself. So can you help me present myself? Let's see. I absolutely can help you present yourself. You're Paolo Ricciuti, that's correct. Where do I come from? You come from Campobasso, Italy, that's correct. Where do people can find me online? People can find you on Blue Sky as paolo.ricciuti.me, that's correct. What about GitHub? You're absolutely right. People can also find you on GitHub as Paolo Ricciuti. What do people know me for? You are known for being a Svelte ambassador and a Svelte maintainer, correct? Where do I work? You work as a senior software engineer at Mainmatter, which is super cool because I get to work with Svelte, but also to teach Svelte, both at conference and meetups, just like this one, but also in my day-to-day job, because we do what's called team augmentation, which means that we join your team, we help you hire, we work on your project with you, which is your best practice. And we recently also can help you with AI because we develop expertise in the field of AI. We also do workshops. We recently did a workshop about how to build an MCP servers and stuff like that. Thanks. So let's talk about, obviously, let me help you remove this conversation. RF, what? It is broken. It's fine. I'll fix it later. So, I don't think I need to introduce MCP to anybody of you watching live, but maybe someone will search for this video and we'll figure out what is MCP even. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and it's a protocol just like HTTP. So just like your browser HTTP client can talk with an HTTP server, a Model Context Protocol client, which is like Cloud Code or Codex or GitHub Copilot or Gemini. And I specifically included Copilot because this is not the LLM itself, it's just something that can talk with the LLM. And generally, MCP clients connect to an MCP server. And an MCP server is something that can basically answer with more information for the client and the LLM in general. So we have stuff like Figma that can send your design, Linear that can send your issues, GitHub that can sync your repository. We even recently launched the Svelte MCP server official that can help you write good Svelte 5 code. And so they answer back to the MCP client, and then the MCP client sends this information to the LLM, and the LLM can do stuff. Basically, it would allow me to do stuff like this. So if I open this and I do this, I have this Cloud Code instance, and I can say, can you go to the next slide? And if everything goes correctly, yeah, I can go to the next slide through Cloud. So obviously this is the most expensive clicker, so I will not use it for this thing. But as I mentioned, I am a Svelte maintainer, and this means that whenever I have something to build, I tend to default to SvelteKit. And so when I started exploring MCP server, obviously I started to look around and see how could I build an MCP server with SvelteKit. And so I look around and I said, okay, there is this Model Context Protocol / SDK, which is an SDK to build an MCP server. Now, let's step back a bit from SvelteKit and Model Context Protocol, and let's take a look at how the ecosystem, the modern ecosystem, looks like. So this is how you create an endpoint in Next.js. So you have a get function that get a request as input and return a response as output. This is how you do it in SolidStart. Get function, get a request, and return a response. This is how you do it in Bun. So you can create a server with like you export a fetch function that get a request and return a response. This is how you do it in Cloudflare. This is how you do it in Deno. And this is how you do it in SvelteKit. So I think it's pretty clear that the modern ecosystem is similar. Like you get a request in and you return a response out. However, this is the first example that you see about an MCP server inside the official SDK. And you can see that like we are importing request and response from Express. And the reason is that these request and response are not the global available one, the web one, but it's the node request and node response. And you can see that it's a bit different how you use it. You're not returning a response, you get a response as input, and then you have to write to it status and .json and stuff like that. And this is why the transport need the request and the response, and for some reason the body, because like they need to be able to read your request and write to your response. Now, if you want to use something like this in a modern framework, there is a way, like there are ways around. For example, the Remix guys released this node fetch server that basically allow you to get a node request and a node response and convert it into web request and web response. And you can do like with this create request and create response. Or Vercel created this MCP handler library that basically create a fake node response. It just passed that to the server, and then the server writes to it, and they just collect the information, and then create an actual web request and web response so that you can use it in Next.js or SvelteKit or SolidStart and stuff like that. Now, I don't know if you know about this guy. It's Valibot, and Valibot, it's very nice. It's basically like a replacement for 𝘻𝘗. If you never used 𝘻𝘗, I mean, I guess you have, because 𝘻𝘗 is a validation library that allow you to define a type, basically, something that looks like a type, and it will also give you type safety. And it looks like this. And the same code for Valibot looks something like this, which is a bit more verbose, but I prefer Valibot because it's much, much smaller and it's also more composable. Because as you can see, like it's all function code. And the interesting bit is that the creator of Valibot and the creator of 𝘻𝘗 come together and created this wonderful library, which is called standard schema, that basically unify all sort of validation libraries under the same type interface. So if they adhere to this type interface, you can basically create a function like this standard validate that receive any validation library as input and return like the actual output, and it will be type safe. So as you can see below you, inside the same function, you can use 𝘻𝘗, Valibot, or archetype, and you will get the right value back. Now, knowing this, I was sure that the official SDK was using something like this. And so I went and tried out, and I got this error, which told me something about 𝘻𝘗 schema. So I said, well, I guess probably they don't use this library. It's fine. Even if I already have Valibot in my project, I'm going to use 𝘻𝘗. So I installed 𝘻𝘗, and I still got an error like this. And so this got me really confused, and I look around, and in the end, I end up looking at the dependency of the library. And that's what I found out. Like, so this tells me a lot of stuff. First, they have a hard dependency on 𝘻𝘗 v3. Now, in this very moment, I just received a notification that like they are working on upgrading 𝘻𝘗 v4. So like it's not the end of the world. But for the moment, if you want to use 𝘻𝘗, you need to use it with 𝘻𝘗 v3. And it's also a dependency. Like you need to use it. Like you can't not use it. And the reason for that is because they also depend on this 𝘻𝘗 to JSON schema, which is a library that takes your 𝘻𝘗 and convert it into a JSON schema. And there's no like general way to convert a validation library into JSON schema. And since MCP need a JSON schema, you're kind of forced to do that. I can see why they did that. But this also told me something else. Like You have express as a dependency, express rate limit. You have course as a dependency, AJV. Like all these things are dependency of the main library, which means that if you are building a standard IO library, you are still using Express as a dependency. Like you still have Express in your node modules. And like, given it's a server, there's no 𝘍𝘳𝘰𝘮, you're probably shipping that to your server, which is a waste. And so I started looking around, and there were small other things that I really didn't like. Now, obviously, this is like, it's not meant as a bash on them. It's just something that I personally didn't like about the library. I think the library is good. So, but the thing that I didn't like was something like this, for example, where this is another example from their README, and you have to create an MCP server, a new instance of MCP server every time, because a server can only connect to a single transport. So every time you get a new session, you need to create a new server and you need to create a new transport. Or something like this, where when you register a resource, if it is a parametric resource, so a dynamic resource, you need to use this new resource template class, which is fine. Like, I'm not opposed to classes. And then you have this like complete param to do completion for the parameters. Which, by the way, is not type safe. Like, so if I mess up params and param, for example, that just doesn't work. But if you want to register a prompt, you have this args schema, which then it's an object that you need to import a completable function that takes the object like validation tool, and then you do the completion. So it's a bit of a weird thing. And also, like, if you want to send an elicitation, you need to manually type your JSON schema instead of using Zod, for example. Yeah, so like all these things like made me like grin a bit while building my SvelteKit server. But then I said, like, MCP is just a JSON-RPC server, so I don't need all of this. I don't need Express even. And so I tried, and so I used this library, JSON-RPC 2.0. It's a very small library. It's just doing JSON-RPC requests. So like this, create a JSON-RPC server. It's not connected to anything. You just receive a method, you receive a JSON, and if it's a JSON-RPC payload, it will return, like it will call one of the methods that you declare here. And so like this, I initialize. So like this is the initialization of the server, and this is the method for the ping. And this is a server. Like I just, with ban, do request.json. If it's a JSON-RPC request, I just use this and I wait server receive. That's it. I don't need to do anything else. Obviously, this doesn't do anything. So let's add, I don't know, tools list maybe. So with this, I can return a list of tools. And so now if I connect to this JSON-RPC server with my agent, I will see that it has a test tool. Now, obviously, this has a test tool, but the tools/call method is not there. So let's add the tools/call method. And what we can do is that we can say, okay, I'm going to save everything inside an array and have a handler, and this handler will be called whenever you do the tools call. And so, like, as you can see, I just find the name like this, and if there's no tool, I just throw an error. Otherwise, I return the value of the handler. And this is a functional MCP server. Doesn't do anything, but it is a functional MCP server, and doesn't need Express, it doesn't need Zod and stuff like that. And so, like, from this, I quickly like dominoed into from me being curious about what this MCP thing is to me writing a brand new library to build MCP server, which is called TMCP, which stands for TypeScript MCP. Now, I talked about all these small little stuff that I didn't like about this library. So let me actually show you if I fixed this problem. So this is how you build an MCP server with TypeScript. And not really, because obviously this doesn't do anything. It's just the JSON-RPC server, so it's not connected to anything. And also, this will give you a TypeScript error. And the reason is that I need to do the same thing. I need to convert between your validation library to a JSON schema. So how can I do it? Well, you can install a separate package. So if you don't want to use a validation library, technically you can avoid it. But if you want, I provide like this adapter 𝘻𝘁, and this now you can use 𝘻𝘁 v4, by the way, to validate your MCP server. And if you don't want to use 𝘻𝘁 v4 and you want to use 𝘻𝘁 v3, there is a separate package because it has different set of dependencies. So you don't install both in case you only need one. Or if you want to use archetype, you can also use archetype, and it's another package that I provide under the @TMCP namespace. Or if you want to use effect, because maybe you are already using effect, you can use effect too. Or personally, I prefer to use Valibot. Now, obviously, this doesn't do anything yet. So let's add a new tool. So with a tool, the signature is a bit different. First thing first, that's another thing that I really didn't like. They use a lot of positional arguments. I don't like that. I want my object, my configuration object, to be this, and I want this to be a very concise, like TypeScript can help me understand what I am writing. I can command space and see that I need the name, the description, and the schema. And after I do this, I can do the tool implementation, obviously. Now, if I add another resource, for example, you can see that the API is very similar. Like you have still a single object with the name, the description, and obviously for the resource, you need a URI. So that's another thing. But how to add a dynamic resource? Well, there is another method, which is a template. And again, you have the name, the description, the URI. You don't have any fancy class. In this case, you just have the URI. And then you have list and complete. And this is actually type safe. So if you write params here, it will yell at you here because you are not providing params, you are providing param. And obviously, you will get param here out of the box. And then you can use the template implementation. And if I add a prompt, you can see that even for a prompt, I have the same shape. And the important bit, in my opinion, is that you're not surprised by the API. So inside tools, you use schema to define the schema of your tool. Inside prompt, you use schema to define the schema of your prompt. The complete function is literally the same as the template function because they serve the same purpose. So that's another thing. If you want to use, for example, inside our tool, we can use an elicitation, and we can send the elicitation message. And there's no need to use to manually type out the JSON-RPC schema, because just like I do here, I can convert this into a JSON-RPC, a JSON schema. And so why should you do it by hand? I can do it. But obviously, this still doesn't do anything. Like, it's just simple JSON-RPC server. So let's actually do something with it. You can install a new package at TMCP transport stdio and define the transport stdio like this, and then you listen, and this is a functional MCP server. And again, this is a separate package because if you are just building an stdio server, you don't need all of that. You don't need Express. You don't need AVJ, Valibot, and stuff like that. But if you are using HTTP, you can install a different package to get the HTTP transport. And then you can just do transport HTTP server, and then you pass this. And the nice thing also is that this will only handle your the routes that concern the MCP server. And so if this does return null, you can just return 404 or even just return like your website, for example. So in this way, it's very easy to have a sort of a middleware that can like serve your website, but also your MCP server, which I think is something that we will see in the future. And just as a quick note, you don't have to do any session management. We saw an example because you need to manually wire up all of your session. This is all handled like by TMCP. Like every session gets its own session. It's using async local storage under the hood. So each session is separate and you cannot link one into the other. So yeah, that's another thing. Now, obviously, I could show you another like million things. Like, for example, I could show you how I also provide authentication helpers. I mean, personally, I will still use 𝘵𝘪𝘴𝘰𝘥𝘦 to do this. But since the official SDK provide an authentication helper, I I mean, nobody would use my library if you could not use authentication helper. And this basically, with this simple provider, you can just specify how to get a client, how to register a client, how to get code, delete, store, and redirect in case you're not logged in. This is how you like create a token or get, delete, and store. Refresh token, you define the issuer, and that's it. You have a functional authorization server that you can use to authenticate your MCP server. Still use better out if you can. Or I've also built something like this that actually solves the problems that the official SDK does not. If you want to like distribute your MCP server, that's an issue because the MCP server protocol right now kind of requires you to have a handle of the original stream that you sent back to the server sent event like connection for sending notification. And that's an issue if you want to deploy on serverless, for example. And so now with my library, you can use TMCP session manager Redis and use Redis as a pub sub so that you can send back that information through the notification channel. Or if you don't want to use Redis, you can use Postgres. Or if you don't want to use Postgres, you can use durable object on Cloudflare. There are a ton of other things that I can talk about. I am out of time. So if you want, you can visit this github.com Paolo Ricciuti/TMCP. You can scan the QR code. Please leave a star, but most importantly, try to build something with it and open an issue if you find something that doesn't work. I already built like the Svelte MCP server with this, so I know that it works, but more people use it, the better. And obviously, thanks for watching.
Well, yeah, I have to say this is brilliant. Every single issue that you pointed out, I have hit. Like Zod v3 versus v4 with the all the different dependencies being stuck on Express or Node or so this is beautiful because I've already seen so many other implementations and forks and whatnot where because one of the things that's kind of bugged me is people will create like their own little implementation so they can get it to work here. But what you're also seeing is things where it's like, oh, Cloudflare has their own approach. Next.js has their own approach, right? Because, and you can't blame them. They want to make it work for their platform because the official SDK doesn't work for their platform.
Yeah, personally, the thing that I kind of hate more is the fact that each one of these is actually using the official SDK under the hood. So you are shipping Express to all of your Next.js app, to all of your Cloudflare workers. Which, at the end of the day, it's the server, so it's probably fine. But I don't know, it's the OCD in me that tells me, you have a huge dependency hanging around there. And I cannot stand.
But no, it's very, because the biggest, because I've seen there's quite a few MCP implementations that come out. The biggest problem I run into, because a lot of people, they build a new one, and it's like, oh, this is better or whatever, is they don't actually cover the entire spec. So that's because for us at OBOT or whatever is we do absolutely everything, every feature that exists in MCP we use in some way. And so it's it always frustrating where it's there's problems with the base SDK. And really I'd just like to see the community work on improving all those things. But it's but I can't use this other one, which is nicer because it doesn't cover the whole spec. But you also identify other issues like the session management is very problematic in the core one, and there's a lot of things that so it's very nice. It looks really, really good. I'm definitely going to check it out. I'm going to probably try to build something on top of it because you solve a lot of the issues.
I try to build as much as possible to test it out. So I built the Svelte MCP server with it. I think Storybook, there's a good friend of mine, 𝘍𝘳𝘰𝘮, that is building a design system MCP for Storybook, and I think he's trying to use the MCP. And so it's getting somewhere, but I would love for more people to build and report 20,000 issues that I can fix.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we do want the upstream one to address all these things, but any great ideas we can kind of.
And I want to make sure I want to be clear usually I don't want to feel rude because I absolutely respect the work of everybody. Like in open source, is like it's very important to be very like I love open source, so I know that like I don't want to bash on anyone. And the only reason why I didn't contribute back to the official SDK is that, as you can see, like there is a lot of like structural difference from the two library, and I will basically need to like overall the whole official library. So
yeah, and that's what I see, because I think, because the official SDK, I mean, I'm not sure who developed or whatever, but I mean, it's like obviously like the protocol is moving so quickly and everything, and they developed that I do think there's going to have to be like a V2, like a breaking one, because as you point, it needs core structural things, but it's great as people are building these other ones where it's like, oh, okay, these are simpler patterns, or cleaner approaches or whatever, and then kind of hopefully we'll end up with a kind of a new rewritten one or whatever. So yeah, so this is great. I like it. I like the attention to detail.
Well, Paolo, thank you so much for coming on. Rajiv, thank you as well. It was a great episode today. Lots of good content, and yeah, we'll be back again next week with some interesting talk. So Paolo, thanks a lot. Darren, as always, thank you. And we'll talk to everybody next week.
Bye-bye.